Inhumane conditions. Sitting on the floor of the wagon, we were transported without food or water. Many of us drank our own urine. After 4 days, a man fainted from thirst several times. He begged us to kill him. The cold made hoarfrost formed on the iron parts of the wagon. We scraped it off and put it in his mouth. He was buried only after we arrived. Do not wish for war. It was early winter. Persistent frosts were a rarity, but when we arrived, the temperature was well below 0 degrees Celsius. The assembly stopped in an open area. I saw no platform or building anywhere. Farther away, evergreen forest darkened the horizon. We had no idea where we were. We didn't even know whether it belonged to our own or to a different country. We waited in vain. A squad of soldiers guided us. We got a bottle of water a day. Still no food. We ate everything we found. We chewed on various plants after melting them under our clothes. It was better than an empty stomach. From the 5th day onwards, we were given bread, sugar, and soup made from what seemed like a type of beet and tobacco leaves. The dead were not even counted. They were placed in a mass grave nearby. The temperature rose above freezing. Another squad of soldiers arrived. They surrounded the prisoners and took us around the forest. Some tried to run into the woods. They were quickly shot. We reached our destination in the afternoon on the other side of the trees. The area was larger than what I could have surveyed at first glance, but later on I had plenty of time to soak it in. It was a rectangular fence with a wire mesh, a watchtower in one corner, an old wooden building in the middle, maybe a barn, and a flat-roof concrete house next to it. While standing in line, I saw a pile of brown canvas in the distance, accompanied by a few smaller bundles and a good number of people who moved about looking busy. It seemed like they were sorting garbage. I also noticed a road a few hundred meters away. At the time, I thought we just stopped for something and we were going to walk on. After a few minutes, the soldiers grouped us together and counted us. I estimated the number of the captives to be around 100. Ahead of us, a metal pipe protruded from a smaller pit with a thick layer of insulating tape wrapped around it. The area around the pit was soaked. I noticed water accumulating in a puddle at the bottom. I licked my mouth, trying to moisten my lips, but failed. My tongue felt like dried fish. We stood there next to the pile of wood for a long time. As my peers and I were longingly watching the puddle of water, I was gripped by a depressing thought. Looking at the muddy pit and the heap of dirt, I understood that the intention was to install a faucet. The pipe was connected, but probably no tap was found, so they tried to seal the end. The faucet will be installed for us, and they will build tents from the slats and the canvas, I thought, but I was only partially right. The tents were assembled by us. They gave us a box of nails and a few hammers, but that was ridiculously few for everyone to be able to lay down under a roof. During work, I met Geza, with whom we have been friends ever since. He is a good person unless you upset him. One must be careful not to. We tore the canvases into long strips, tied the slats together with those and all sorts of cut-off ropes. Some even used their shoelaces, which I considered terribly irresponsible. But in the end, no one was missing their shoelaces, as all our clothes were taken away a few days later. While we were building the tents, the soldiers mounted 8 shower heads on makeshift frames branching off the plumbing. The tents were already standing when another group arrived, doubling the number of people in the camp. They lined us up. We had to undress, take off all our clothes and valuables. We were almost exclusively men. Each of the few women were accompanied by a soldier unnecessarily. No one wanted to bother them. I tried to look the other way, just like everyone else. After queuing for hours, we took a bath in the icy water, although first everyone quenched their thirst. We had to hurry because whoever didn't finish in time was pushed forward by the supervisors. The shivering people were admitted one by one to a doctor, who divided them into 3 groups. After we were registered, we were sprinkled with lice medicine, also called pediculicide. They handed everyone a pair of trousers, a shirt, 2 underpants, leather shoes, and a water bottle. The women were held separately in the wooden house, the men remained in the tents. Luckily, after this we were able to fill our bottles at the tap at any time. There was so little food that we didn't even set up a dining tent. The few bites were gobbled up immediately after the handout. Nevertheless, we were forced to work as the camp had to be completed. Digging graves has become an everyday job. A group arrived, most of whom were women. Next to our camp, a separate section was fenced off for them, and they were taken there along with the women who had been living in the wooden house until then. I still mostly remember the happenings described above, though my memory consists only of still images, which I have to complete as logic dictates. Regarding the following events, however, the days become a blurry mess. A few sentences cover up events of several months. What has managed to ingrain itself in my mind, despite my exhaustion, malnutrition, and generally miserable state, has mostly faded because I tried to forget the horrors I lived through. Because of all the weariness and hunger, I had a hard time speaking coherently, and that was also the case with storing memories. It is said that the experiences gained during the day are saved into our long-term memory during sleep, but for us, sleep was known only like a perfidious lover from long years ago. All I know is an incomplete sequence of events. Interestingly, the mental strain showed earlier as I was still more or less able to do physical work at the time. I tried to sleep properly, thinking my body needed less energy during sleep, but something was always preventing it. When it wasn't the unfinished tasks, it was the spiritual torment that kept me awake. I remember this clearly. I was headed in some arbitrary direction to see how large the camp was. It was around dusk. The temperature was quite tolerable. We were done for that day. Geza rested, but I thought I would look around. I had a good day so far. Usually, by the end of work hours, I was so exhausted that I barely had the strength to walk. Therefore, I haven't explored the camp, even though I had been imprisoned there for many weeks. All around the camp had to be 5 meters of free space inside the fence. We were not allowed to even set foot in that area. Arriving at the wire mesh, I saw a pit outside. It could have been 5 meters deep and at least 100 meters in diameter, cut into the ground like a staircase. Rock mine, I thought. There and then, all my strength had abandoned me. I laid on the ground holding my head. They brought us here to mine stone. Lying down, I stared at the hazy grey sky, my head whirling, slightly dizzy. My thoughts went in all directions. I was unable to concentrate. I was at rock bottom. All hope seemed to have died out. I sunk my hands into my pockets, narrowed my eyes, and started singing an old song, but the lyrics didn't really come to mind. We are going to die here. Despite the singing, this thought kept going through my head. I started sobbing. I tried hard to describe the feeling, but I wasn't able to find the right words. Maybe the right words don't even exist, so I hope you will never know what it feels like. I felt empty and useless like a bird's nest when the chicks fly out. There is nothing left but loneliness and feces. Life has lost all meaning. There was nothing to keep my soul from darkening. I sank deep. How much more I wanted to do. Sorrow gnawed at my heart. How did I deserve this? A guard walking by saw me and told me to go back. I didn't react. He came over and kicked me, but I still didn't move. Due to malnutrition, bruises formed very easily on us. I knew there would be a huge black mark on my side. He kicked harder. I might have hoped to annoy him enough to kill me. Death works pretty well against feeling hungry. But the soldier didn't shoot me, just kept kicking, of which after a while he got bored and yanked me off the ground. I started laughing. He slapped me and asked me what my job was. He hit me for a second time. I said we built the tents. He tossed me aside and sent me to sleep. With my head down, I began to wander toward my sleeping place at the other end of the camp. Well, I'm not dead, I thought. Maybe I can keep going for some time. Someone poked at my shoulder. Turning around, I saw the soldier offering me a whole slice of rusks in his outstretched hand. I stared at him puzzled. He let the food fall off his hand and left. As my confusion dissipated, I eagerly picked up the piece of bread from the ground and sank it into my pocket. We had to bring tools and equipment from some remote warehouse. About 40 people were selected, including me, and we were put on a train. They put us in the windowless cart. The door was closed on us. I didn't see anything during the journey. Hunger was powerfully burning my stomach. There was nothing to distract me from the empty sensation in my abdomen. The train slowed down several times, but we only stopped on arrival. We were lined up and then we were led to a warehouse through a small town. But of course we had no idea where we were going until we arrived. On the way, I searched for a street sign or other indication of our whereabouts. As we got into the small town, I looked at the thin, skull-like faces of my starving brethren, and I knew we were in a worse position than animals. I once saw an ibex that had one of its horns broken, hanging down from some skin-like tissue. It must have been broken in a dominance fight. The goat just stood there. It didn't seem to understand what had happened to him. This was not the case with humans. They saw the grim future that awaited them. They knew all too well how terribly they suffered, without meaning, purpose, or hope of improvement until they drew their last breath. Every day we saw the graves in the corner of the camp. There was a motion that distracted me from the faces. We noticed that the bins were lined up next to the road. There must have been garbage collection that day. There was no need for more. The boys jumped out of line, toppled the bins, and began searching their contents. Regardless of the yelling soldiers or the occasional pounding, they licked boxes of sardines. Lagging behind, they ate everything from grape stalk through the chicken bones to the rotten apple. It was truly a disheartening sight. I went there and sobbed. My heart was torn by humiliation and the awareness that we lack essential human needs such as food, accommodation, and sleep. After the mournful walk, we had to load all sorts of tools, first into a car and then out of it into a cargo wagon just like the one we traveled in. Plenty of pickaxes proved my theory that we would have to work in the quarry. Prisoners arrived in small groups for a long time, but there wasn't a significant change in numbers. So, under the leadership of the officers, labor brigades were formed. Basically, a railway was built, the subtasks of which were performed by the individual groups. One department produced the limestone, the other built the embankment, and the third group laid the rails under the supervision of foreign engineers. We were deployed there so we could walk to work, relieving our employers from the burden of having to transport workers. I was assigned to build the embankment. Two people got a shovel and an earth-moving device called a troglite, which was something like a stretcher. At the bottom lay the embankment with a gravel bed on top, in which were placed the sleepers. So first we had to carry earth, then the rubble from the quarry. The rest was not our business. The land was close, but the mine was not. Usually we had lunch at the camp, since we kept going there for stone anyway. The work was harder than building tents, but our diet was supplemented with potatoes and beet. I was delighted by this. Of course, the amount still turned out to be insufficient, so we ate whatever else we found. Work time lasted 10.5 hours, including a lunch break. I worked with a young man. We became friends. He was halfway through university when his compulsory military service had begun. Almost immediately after training, he was taken prisoner. He moved in with us because we still had room and he didn't like the people he had been sharing a tent with. The work was boring. We talked a lot with Tamás, the young boy. Despite his age and overall childish demeanor, I found him extremely sensible and ingenious. We spent time telling each other meaningful or memorable events of our lives. We also came up with a scoring system to evaluate what we heard. What mattered the most was how amusing or instructive the narrative was. The length of the story also mattered. A good ending doesn't mean much if you have to give a boring explanation first that goes on for minutes before the listener can understand it at all. It was a 1 to 10 scale. A story rated 4 was something like, if you had kept quiet, it would have been just as good. So it was possible to classify stories that are a shame to tell. Of course, we were also influenced by the overall mood we had. In a very dull environment, we also talked about and appreciated memories that could be valued less otherwise. So we exchanged stories and had fun scoring them. Of course, we also talked about many other things. Before things went bad, Tamás was actively searching for a relationship. "How do I know who to marry?" he asked, breathing on his hands to warm them. I was just laughing. "You're asking the wrong man. I'm not married. You must know more than I do." No, I don't exactly plan on getting married at all. My parents just kept screaming at each other. Now they are separated. I don't need anything like that. I moved the ground more enthusiastically than usual, but the handle of the tool was constantly wanting to rotate out of my weakened grip. And that's the problem. You can never know. Even if she's nice at first, it can change. And it usually does. Tommy just nodded for a while, managing the troglite. Yes, that's the problem. We don't know what it will be like in many years. Exactly. But what if I've known a girl for a long time, then I know what she's like? It would be good. I wanted to sound reassuring. But I haven't known any girl for a long time, let alone one whom I would have a chance to marry on top of that. Or one that would want to live with me at all. Well, that's the other thing. Not many women would want to live their lives with me. And what do you do about that? Nothing, I shrugged. When I was a kid, I saw my parents arguing. I thought mine would be better. Then I realized that's not how things work. I'm no different from my parents. I put the shovel down, leaning on its handle. Women only bring trouble anyway. That was a 4. Sorry. Not 4 or 5. It's just sad. The embankment grew slowly. In the thin coat, the cold penetrated up to the bone. People's arms became red. Our fingers were tingling. Our noses started dripping from doing the tiniest work. The food was still scarce. No one wanted to work on their own volition. Most of the lunchtime was spent lining up. The food distributor stopped at the soldiers' quarters, from where he brought out the soup, turning several times with the bucket. Those in line watched with a keen eye to see if he was measuring fairly, and if there's any of it left, What is the distribution like? Over time, the supply of beets seemed to dwindle, as it was replaced by sauerkraut. I guess they didn't want to waste cabbage on us while there was fodder still in stock. For weeks we ate the soup and cabbage. Most of the time we were given a piece of potato or artichoke to make it a meal. We started to refer to the cabbage as mescan spaghetti. Some of us were moved to a different job. I asked if Tamás could come too, but they didn't talk to me. A military van was taken every day to another city where we met a few civilians. They felt sorry for us and were kind to us. They even gave us some food. I tried to talk to one of them, but he just shook his head to show he didn't understand. We had to dig round pits at the new workplace, 2 meters wide and 2 meters deep. Out of curiosity, we asked what the pits were for. The leader who brought us replied, "You'll be buried here." He held a machine gun in his hand. We didn't ask any more questions. A few said they would report him, and it seemed like the news traveled far enough because we didn't see the one who made that statement ever again. Later, a lieutenant from the district headquarters came to conduct an investigation. He also interrogated the camp doctor, who happened to be a prisoner himself. The lieutenant arrested many leaders and took them away. Other officers came in their place.